welcome to the Innerfire podcast. We're glad you're with us today. A few days ago, we had the opportunity to sit down with Joy Williams and discuss with her how she is integrating her faith into her service in the public sector. Joy currently serves as president of the Board of Trustees for the Lamar Consolidated Independent School District near Houston, Texas. Joy is a native Texan, and she has a business management degree from Texas A&M. She worked for years in the energy industry. Once she got out of that, she served part-time as a Spanish teacher in a local school. She, interestingly enough, does not have kids in the public school system. However, she is on the school board. And so we want to talk about why she got involved in that and how she is living her faith out in that role. So Joy, welcome to the Innerfire podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. For our listeners' sake, why don't you just tell us a little bit about who Joy Williams is?
So Joy Williams, I am the daughter of John and Libby Werner, and my mom is from North Carolina and my dad is from California. And they met and made their way down to Texas, and I was born in Texas City, Texas in 1975. And I am the youngest of three children. I have an older brother and an older sister.
Let me interrupt you right there, because I've got to ask you this question. So do you consider yourself, even though your parents were not native Texans, do you consider yourself a Texan?
Absolutely. And I'll tell you,
I asked that question because most Texans are very proud of being Texans, and it kind of informs how they live the rest of their lives. So, having that North Carolina and California mix there, I wasn't sure if you had some allegiance outside of Texas, or if you were truly a Texan.
Truly a Texan, and I'll tell you something a little funny is that my sister was born in Chicago. So we give her a hard time that she is not born in Texas, and
she's not a native Texan.
So it is very important. I take it seriously that I was born in Texas. I'm legitimate.
Very good, very good. That's important for people to know, because I know a lot of Texans and they're proud to be Texans. So very good. I'm sorry I interrupted you. Go ahead with what you were saying there. So
no, that's good. And so I went through school and I graduated with a business degree from Texas A&M University in 1997. And I worked in the energy industry for several years. I was at Enron when things went south. Several other energy industries. And that's also where I met my husband, David. And he is also an Aggie. And we have two children. My son, Noah Williams, who would have just turned 16 in April. He is now in heaven with Jesus. And my daughter, Molly, will be 14 in October. So, and I currently serve, I'm going into my third year on the Lamar CISD School Board, and I currently serve as the president of the school board.
Very good, very good. And we definitely want to dive in and talk about that a little bit. I'm glad you married another Aggie. That probably would have made for a rough household had you not, because there was a lot of allegiances, but those Texas allegiances are pretty strong between the Aggies and the Longhorns and such. So I'd say create a lot of domestic tranquility by marrying another Aggie.
You're very right about that. It helps a lot.
For sure. What about your spiritual background? Were you brought up in church, or did you get involved in church later? And maybe just kind of tell us a little bit about that background and your spiritual journey to get you to where you are now.
So I was raised in an Episcopalian charismatic church. I didn't realize it at the time because it was all I knew, but many attendees would dance in the aisles. A lot of people spoke in tongues on a regular basis. We took communion every Sunday. I went to youth group every Sunday evening. My parents were very involved in the church. We had home groups. So my parents, since I was born, knew the value of being part of the body of Christ and being active in the body of Christ. And so from the time I was born, I was part of a church. As I grew into my own faith, if you will, I was not as active in college in my faith. But as I became more of an adult, I decided to take on my spiritual journey as my own and not from my family. And so that's looked many different ways, if you will. But probably over the last 6 years, the Lord has really refined my faith through many hardships, but also has allowed me to see his mercy in so many ways and his goodness, and that he has gone before me. And I trust him so much more than I ever have. And so I'm really grateful for those hardships, even though it didn't necessarily feel like it at the time.
Absolutely. So you say you kind of gotten, I'll say, more dedicated or more serious about your faith over the last 6 or so years. Were those hardships that kind of spurred that, or was there some other catalyst in your life that caused you to say, I really need to get a little bit more serious about my faith and my faith journey?
One of the things, mostly I would say hardships. One of them was unrest with our house that we were previously living in. And so we had to move out of the house by choice. We were moving, and I thought we were going to be moving into a new home. And so we rented a home for 6 months, which turned into 2.5 years. During that time, my husband lost his job. And so there was a lot of things that I had planned, but the Lord had other plans. And so through that, he really taught my husband and myself how to be content in all situations. And we also both turned to the Lord heavier than we ever had in our lives. And so we both were growing as a couple and as individuals through these experiences. And so I'm also able to see why the Lord allowed us to go through those situations, and how he did need us to learn some lessons, if you will, and to trust him through it all. So there was a couple, running for the school board, the first time, I've run twice, the Lord showed me many things as well. And so it's a process that I can talk about in a different question. But sure. Yes, I would consider that one. And then obviously when my son went to be with Jesus at the age of 15, that has grown my faith even more. So several, I would say the hardships are what really has been the refining moments for me.
Very good. We don't like those hardships. They're not very pleasant to go through, but certainly they do refine our faith and can help us, understand the importance of faith, I think. Nobody likes to go through them, but I am glad to hear that, it has strengthened you and not pushed you away, right? Because in some instances it can do that too, but I am glad that it has strengthened you, and I think that's evident in some of the work that you do that maybe we'll get a chance to talk about. So anyway, very good. You mentioned there about running for school board. Obviously, you are a school board member there. Tell us a little bit about your political background. Have you always been in politics? When did you get involved in politics? Why did you get involved in politics? So just Give us a little bit of the backstory there on why you ran for the school board the first time.
So as far as I know, no one in my family has ever been involved in politics besides voting. So I do not have a political background. I never had any political ambitions. I got involved with an organization, and I went to a meeting by myself. It was about a 30-minute drive from my house. And so it wasn't convenient. It wasn't with friends. It was on my own. And at the meeting, they shared something about our local textbooks. And so I thought, that's really good information. I would like to bring that back to our district. At the time, my son was in elementary school, in our local public elementary school. I didn't know who my school board member was. I'd never presented to the school board before. I'd never been to a meeting. I was completely naive to the whole process. But what I did was I found out when the next school board meeting was. I had to look it up online and figure out how to get signed up to speak. And actually a neighbor said she would go with me. I take that back. A neighbor did go with me to the actual school board meeting for support. Mm-hmm. It was nerve-wracking. It's not an easy thing to do, to stand up there, even if I do have a presentation, but it's still not an easy thing to do, to stand up before everybody behind you listening and facing all 7 trustees, and they're not allowed to respond to you. So you're just kind of talking out in the open. So I gave my presentation, and behind me, sitting in the audience behind me that evening, was the former superintendent of the district, one of the former superintendents of the district. And I had never met him before. I didn't know who he was. And when I sat down from giving my presentation, he complimented me on my presentation and asked me if I had done that before. And I said no. And he said, "Have you thought about running for the school board?" And I said, "How do you do that?" So 2 weeks later, I'm running for the school board. In those 2 weeks, I met with several people, and I learned some of the things that disturbed me to know about some of the things that were taking place within the district with some of our contracts and current trustees. And so that was the push for me to go ahead and run for the school board.
So just if you pause right there for just a second, tell us a little bit about the district you're in. Obviously, you're in the Houston area there. For us outside of that area, does that encompass the whole of Houston, or is there a part of Houston? How big of a district is this? How many schools do you oversee or help? I don't know, help govern, I guess might be the correct word for it. Kind of give us a size and scope idea there.
Okay, so we are not in Houston at all, but we are outside, right? We're neighbors, if you will. We are in Fort Bend County, and we have approximately 37,000 students in our district right now, over 40 campuses. We're opening our 6th high school this fall. We are the 4th, I believe, fastest growing district in Texas. So we have 2 large districts that we are neighbors of, other than Houston ISD, and they are somewhat landlocked, if you will. And so we are growing at a very rapid pace. We cover 385 square miles, and we're only a small percentage built out. So we have a lot of growth. Our demographics presentations show us not quite doubling in the next 10 years, but close. And so to give you perspective on that, we've got over 5,000 employees. And so we are only in Fort Bend County, but we are in a few different cities. And so we have 7 trustees.
You're probably gonna meet your growth goals there, or your growth projections, because all those Californians are coming to Texas, right?
That's what I hear.
So some of your dad's previous acquaintances, being from California, may have also decided that Texas is a better place to be. So it's a lot like Tennessee where I am. We're getting a lot of new California neighbors. So
and all the way. Okay. Wow. Yeah.
Okay, I just want to get a size of that school district just to kind of give us an idea, because I knew it was pretty large, and you talk about being on the school board, being president of the school board. That's pretty large responsibility. That your decisions impact literally thousands of kids and then thousands of families. So a lot goes into that. So you went to this meeting. You decided somebody asked you about running for school board. You hadn't really thought about it before, but you wound up running for school board. And so was that you were talking about a textbook issue there. Was your thinking, you mentioned some of the things that were going on with other trustees and things. So you just felt like the school board needed higher quality people, better influences? I mean, is that kind of what pushed you over the edge to run?
The textbooks is what got me to the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
The possible injustices that were taking place with our taxes and on the board that I was hearing about, I would say alleged, if you will,
Sure.
are what pushed me to run for the school board. I wanted to see any possible or alleged, I'll say that, corruption at that level to be ended, to end it, if you will. Sorry, I'm rambling a little bit. And so that was what got me to ultimately run for the school board. I didn't really understand at the time all the pieces of the puzzle.
Sure.
So I didn't understand the gravity of the role of a trustee, which I believe that God does that a lot. Mm-hmm. Because I think if I did, I don't know that my decision would have been the same, knowing how large scale, and the amount of responsibility and all these things. So I feel like I understood just a small piece of the puzzle at the time. Mm-hmm. Enough to motivate me to run.
So I'm getting ahead of myself probably a little bit, but I think it's a good time to ask this question. And then I'll get back. We'll try to circle back to more the history of your progression into politics. But just as me, I've never run for an office. My dad has run for political office in the past, so we got a little bit of involvement there historically with politics. But in general, if we look at politics, whether it's the local level, state level, federal level, a lot of people point fingers and say they're corrupt, they're lying, we're not getting the whole truth. You hear all these things said about politicians, right? Did you have a fear of taking on that same label of, okay, as soon as I go into politics, everybody's going to think I'm corrupt, everybody's going to think I'm angling for something or trying to take advantage of the system or use it for my own benefit? I mean, what was your thinking along those lines?
Again, I would have to go back to, I knew so little about what it entailed, that I didn't understand some of the things that were to come. I thought, but to be fair, during my election, my first and my second election, we have in my community, in my district, I would say it's rather amicable. Mm-hmm. There is not a lot of open aggression, I guess, against one another. And so I knew there was very few people know much about what goes on school boards. You can tell that by voting turnout. You can tell that by participation in the meetings, participation and committees, that type of thing. And so I was also one of those people that didn't know very much about what all, who all the players were and these types of things. And so I didn't really, that just didn't come on my radar until it started happening to me, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And so really, like I said, I knew if these things are really happening, I want to help put an end to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that wasn't part of my thought process at the time. Because again, I think had I known some of the things I would have to endure during the race,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not one for confrontation. I know that sounds crazy being on a school board, but I don't enjoy it. And so I think God just allowed me to glimpse what he knew would motivate me, and maybe per se not frighten me so much from running for that office.
Right. So along that same line, a couple of things came to my mind as you were saying that. I guess the first one I would say is you see a lot of lack of involvement, as you said, with voter turnout, people not participating. I mean, I hear a lot from teachers about lack of parental involvement, even in their kids in the school system. So that, to me, that kind of says there would be an opportunity, right, for a Christian who wanted to have some influence in how a school system or a city council or any other kind of a governing body, if not many people are wanting to get involved, does that open the door more for Christians to have more influence in the public arena?
For sure. I mean, there's many more people than there are offices. Thank goodness. Otherwise we'd have really big, really, really big government. So not everybody can hold a public office. However, yes, I mean, on the school board, a lot of people don't understand what the school board does. And again, I'm guilty of that, not now, obviously, but prior to running, I didn't fully understand the role. And so, yes, you vote on the curriculum, or the textbooks, I guess. You adopt the textbooks. The state adopts the TEKS, our curriculum, but we adopt the resources, we approve the resources, we approve many things, we govern, we create policy, we vote on policy. And so there's many areas, we set the budget. There's many areas where you have influence, where it's either going to go one way or the other, or down the middle of the road, And so a lot of people don't understand that they can read the textbooks or do these different things and then go to their school board trustees and say, here's what I found in here. Is this align with what our district is trying to teach, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of opportunities for people to be engaged, and even if they aren't running for an office, so there's a lot of openings, if you will, to have influence.
So from that standpoint, we're always talking on the podcast about people taking their faith outside the walls of the church, integrating it into the different areas of their lives. Obviously, if you have kids in a school system, that's a big part. That's a lot of influence on your life, is how that school runs, even more so than, probably a city council or a board of, county commissioners or something like that, I would say, because your kids are there, right? So should we get more involved? I mean, a lot of Christians, I think, are just sitting on the sideline, and especially as it concerns their faith, they're sitting on the sideline. So if there's something that's bothering them in the school system relative to their faith, they're not necessarily speaking up about that. Should we be getting more involved, I guess, is the question.
So a little back, yes. The answer is yes. a little bit about me, and I'm probably going to jump questions here, but so my daughter is not in the public school. She is in a university model school and has been since kindergarten. So it's a part-time homeschool, part-time private Christian school. So a little background on me. She started there in kindergarten and she will be entering 8th grade this year. So when it comes to education, I understand that not everybody excels and learns the same way. And so I love that we have some choices when it comes to how we educate our children. My son was always in the public school, save for 1 year. He tried the same school that my daughter is currently in. It was not a good fit. The public school was a very good fit for him. And so we went right back. So right now, because my son is with Jesus in heaven, I do not have any children in the public school. That was a thought of mine when I resumed my work on the school board. I took a few months off and my board was very gracious with me when my son went to be with Jesus. And so, but what I realized that it wasn't about my 2 kids. All the time that I spend, and granted, I don't know if everybody knows this, but it is not a paid position. It is a volunteer position on the school board. I spend part-time to full-time hours, depending on the week and the month of the work I do with the board. And I never ran for the board for my 2 kids, because if I did, there's a lot of other ways that I could spend my time if it was just about my 2 kids. It's about our communities. It's about being lights for the majority of the kids that are getting educated in a public system. And for, as you said, not necessarily walking away from it, but trying to have a positive influence in the schools. So again, I don't condemn anyone that's not in the public school, because my daughter's not in the public school. I felt like God was leading her down a different path before she ever even entered public school, not because I had a negative experience with my son. That's just how I felt God was leading me for her life. And so I would say, regardless of where your kids go to school, you can be a light in the public school system. Another trustee on my board has no kids in the public system. Both of his children are in the same school as my daughter. Some of the trustees have children that are not of school age anymore. So we all add value to the board as taxpayers, as, wanting to give back to our community. We have different perspectives on what that looks like, but I think that's also very important, because we can all add different values in our discussions, in the way we vote, when we're shaping policy, when we decide on the budget, where we feel, being a good steward of the money, of the taxes that we're collecting, where it goes. And so having the community involved in some area of that, I think, is very important.
Well, that's very interesting to me, because, I just generally make an assumption, and assumptions get us in trouble. But the general assumption is that somebody wants to serve on a school board because their kids are involved in the school system, right? So you're just describing yourself and several others who do not actually have, kids actively participating in the school system. The other thing is, certainly is not the case in all jurisdictions, is you're not getting paid to do what you do. I know I can speak to Florida, where I came from, and where my dad one time ran for school board. That was a paid position. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was a paid position. So, I mean, that in itself brings up a point or a question. I know we're chasing a little bit of rabbit here, but I mean, should those be paid positions, or does it speak to who's wanting to serve there if they're volunteer positions?
I was actually having this conversation this morning. I believe that if I got paid, if I received payment for being a trustee, it would change my why. I get it, like our city council here, they get like a stipend, you know, they get small amounts like travel funds and that type of thing. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You know, I mean, I don't, and I'm not saying I would never, that I'd be opposed to receiving some of that, but at the same time, it's service. You know, I'm serving, and God calls us to serve, right? He came to serve, not to be served. And so service is different to me than getting paid for a position. There's paid positions that are, they take up a full time and they have to be there 8 to 5, et cetera. So I don't have to do that either. And it's, for me as a trustee, it's what I put into it. You know, there's trustees and their commitment looks different in every district and even throughout our board, you know, and so we all have different circumstances, and some of us have full-time jobs. I don't have a full-time job. I'm able to not work at this time. And so not everybody that serves has that opportunity. And so we all contribute in the best way that we can. And so I would say that I would never personally want to get paid for this job, because I wouldn't want it to change any of my why of why I'm serving.
Mm-hmm. Well, you make a good point. You know, Christians are called to serve. That service looks different for different people, right? You're at the moment, you're called to serve the school system there by being a trustee, by serving as the president of the board. Not all Christians are going to be called to do that service, but we all are called to do some service, right? And that's part of taking our faith outside the walls of the church, is going out and serving other people in whatever capacity God has called us to. So talk about a little bit about your faith as far as it relates to serving the public school system. You know, we live in a ever more secular world where faith is not always welcomed. How has your faith and the reality of the secularism that we have, how have those kind of intersected with your service on the school board, as far as, you know, how your faith, I guess, is played out in that arena?
On the school board, I would definitely say my faith is my own. It's a private, it's not something that, but by being respectful, I'm sorry, my puppy's here. We do not have open prayer in our public board meetings. We have a moment of silence. So how I choose to use my moment of silence personally is I pray. It is a prayer, you know, I invite God into that meeting, and I ask for his wisdom and his words. And, you know, because I know that the Lord wants the best for all of us, I want his wisdom in the decisions that I'm making that would be the best for the community. And many times I have to step outside of my own personal desires and understand how it affects 37,000 students and their families, et cetera. So my faith is not on display, if you will, verbally, but I hope that my actions and how I treat other people and the way I navigate my role and being a good steward with our finances and trying to see everyone that I come in contact with as a image bearer of Christ, and to treat them in that, no matter what faith, you know, what their faith looks like or what their background is, that I'm respectful and even when I'm attacked personally, to how I handle myself reflects me as an ambassador of Christ, if you will.
Mhm.
And so even though I'm not able to discuss my faith on a regular basis in certain situations, the way I treat others as God would have me treat them, and give them grace as he gives me grace,
Mhm.
is how I can live my faith out in my role.
Well, I think this is an important point, and I'm going to kind of make a statement, and then I'd like for you to comment on it, and if you agree or disagree. But I think sometimes when we think about Christians being involved in politics, you know, you can just conjure up these images of, I'm going to go into the school board and I'm going to have the Bible. I'm going to sit it on the table in front of me, whether they like it or not, and I'm going to kind of, be real vocal about the Bible and my faith and those kind of things. And I think sometimes we lose sight of the fact that we're there to have influence, not necessarily to get our way, if you will. Is that kind of, am I describing how that should work in your view, as far
Yes.
as influence rather than Bible pounding?
Yes, I agree totally. That's not why I'm there, right? I'm there to represent my clients. They know my character already, right? They know my faith, but I'm there to create policy and, like I said, budget and these other things. But I'm also there, to be respectful. Not everybody on my board shares the same faith, and so. That did come up, and I needed to understand that I can still have my faith and be respectful of others. And so, yes, our actions are very important in how we treat other people. And so, I also have, my moral basis, and that I don't deviate from. And so these reflect my decisions and my work ethic and how I serve others. And so I agree with you that it doesn't have to look a certain way when we're called to serve.
Right. Well, I think for some people, they may view it and say, well, I can't do this. If I was on the school board that's more secularly oriented, I couldn't do this or that or the other, but we can still have influence. That's not a justification for us not to be there and be involved and do exactly what you say you're doing, is living out the view and the image of Christ through your actions without verbalizing it when you're sitting in a school board meeting or what have you. And so I just think that's important for people not to let that view keep them out of serving just because they think, oh, this is too secular for me to get involved in. And I will just say, some kudos to you, because we have a common friend, Lauren and Kevin Tucker, and I can tell you that they have spoke very highly that you're being successful in presenting the image of what a Christian should be when you're serving on the school board and in the community. So kudos to you for that, and we do appreciate that. So anyway, I think that's we've kind of covered a lot of territory there, but we kind of got away. I want to just skip back real quick to your history, because you ran for school board, if I remember correctly, but you did not get elected. But then you ran again and did get elected. Can you circle back and just give us a little bit of that history to tell us how you actually wound up on the board?
So ran for the first time in 2015, and I did not get elected, but I saw, and first of all, some of the things that God showed me through running that first time, some of the relationships that I was able to develop at the time that God brought into my life. Like, for example, the Tuckers. That is, when I ran, we had mutual friends, and the Tuckers sat outside of the voting place and held my signs for one of the days. You know, they didn't know me. I didn't know them, but we had common values, and we understood through common friends. When you know somebody and they'll vouch for somebody else, that says a lot, right? Especially if you know their character. So that's how it happened. And so I became friends with the Tuckers through politics, if you will, but in a really good way, right? And so, but the Tuckers also gave up their time to go sit in the heat and hold a sign for me, not knowing me, but just because somebody else vouched for my character. And so I met a lot of great people that are willing to be a part of politics, even if they weren't interested in running for the board, but they're interested in helping somebody who they felt like would represent us well. So there's so many pieces that people can play. So during that time, when the gentleman won, and I did not get elected, he was able, through his process of getting elected, God allowed something to happen to him during that time, that he was able to call out some of the corruption that was happening. That did not happen to me. And so I would not have been able to do some of the things that he was able to do for the benefit of our whole community. And so I saw that I was meant to be part of that process, but not meant to be elected. And so, it is a ding to your pride. You put yourself out, you block walk, you do all of these things, and you're on public display, and so it is. I won't pretend like it wasn't painful to lose, if you will.
Sure.
But when your goal is not to win for yourself, but that you want everybody else to win, you want the children to win, you want the community to win, that goal was achieved. And so I was very supportive of him, and I continued going to the school board meetings and supporting him and the other trustees that I got to know during the process. And so fast forward 3.5 years later, it's a 4-year term. This gentleman calls me and says, "I'm not going to run again, but I know you, and I know how you would be as a trustee. I'm asking if you will run again, and I will support you and your election this time." So thinking back on what that process felt like the first time, I thought, oh man, I don't know if I want to do that again. And I watched some of the stuff that he had to go through to weed out some of the stuff that I consider not good for our school district. I told him, you know what? I don't know. I'm honored that you would call me and think of me for that, but I need to pray about it. I said, if God's not calling me to it, I don't want to do it. And so I prayed about it, and I discussed it with my family, because it's a big family commitment.
Sure.
You really need them to be on board. Granted, like I said, the first time I ran, they had no idea, just like I didn't either. And so it took me 3 months to get back to him on the decision. And I finally got to the point where I said, Lord, if you could just give me a sign that if you want this for me. I know other people are encouraging me, but I want to be in your will only. And he gave me a sign that only meant something to me. And it was neat because it went back to that whole textbook thing that started the 4 years prior. And so I love that, how he weaves it all in our lives as well. So nothing is by coincidence or chance. His timing is always perfect. So I ran again, and my opponent was again one of the other lady that was in the race with me the 4 years prior. And again, I believe her and I ran an amicable race. And so, but you do get things because, people get some people do get heated, and some people get, they feel like when you're running for a public office that you're free to talk to them and say things about them that you would not normally with other people. And so to just have to kind of take some things and know that, you know, you're not always going to get to squelch rumors. You can't control the narrative out there, but you can control your own actions and how you handle yourself, right? And I know where my value comes from, and that's not what other people think of me, but it's what the Lord thinks of me. And so always keeping that in focus is very important. And so when I won this time, you know, I never thought I'd run for the school board ever, let alone lose and run again. And that the person that I lost to would be asking me to run in their place and support me. So, you know, it's an example to me that when we take these steps that the Lord calls us, we don't know how it's going to end, but just to be faithful and say, yes, Lord. Yes, Lord. And, you know, as scripture says, he says, who can I send? And I said, you know, you can send me. And so I didn't know what the outcome would be. I just took the small steps, and, you know, that mindset has continued with me on the board. I don't look at things as, am I going to run again? Or am I going to do this? Or what's going to be a year out? I take it meeting by meeting. I take it agenda item by agenda item. I ask for wisdom from the Lord. I try to gather as much information as I can. I do my due diligence so that anytime I make a vote on the board, I can justify why I made that vote. And so it's just step by step. So I think when people try to envision something too far out, it's just overwhelming, and we say, no, never mind, you know? So, and here I am. And I never thought I would run for president of the board. That was not on my radar. And now it's my second time to be president. And so it's just, we don't know what the Lord has for us, but if we continue to try to be in his will and just take these small, faithful steps forward, he will show us what he needs us to do.
I totally agree. And I think you said something there, you know, I think it's just so key. And even in the short time that I've known you, I've picked up on the fact that prayer is very important to you. And, you know, you said when you were contacted by the trustee that you lost to the first go round, you said, hey, let me pray about this. And that wasn't a, you know, let me go pray and I'll get back with you tomorrow. It's really spend some time praying about that, waiting for God to give you a clear direction on that. And I mean, that's really the key, whether we're serving on the school board or in some other political position or just serving the community in general, it needs to be in alignment with what God has called us to do. We find that out through prayer, you know, through asking him and through communing with him about those things. And so, so that's very good. I want to move on a little bit. We've got a few other things to talk about. You mentioned your daughter was not currently in the public school system. She was in a private school. It sounded like it maybe had a homeschooling element to it. We are big homeschoolers. You know, we homeschooled our 3 kids. We say a lot of positive things about homeschooling, encourage other people to explore that possibility. Being as close to the public school system as you are, serving on the board, what are your thoughts on homeschooling, and how does that play into the public school system?
So, yeah, so my daughter in kindergarten, she was home with me 3 days, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then she was in school Tuesday and Thursday. So I considered it kind of cheating homeschool. They didn't have to come up with curriculum. The teachers would give us an assignment sheet for the week, and we would do it, and they would teach a new concept on the Tuesday. We would work on it at home. New concept Thursday. We would work on it at home over the weekend. So I appreciate what homeschoolers do. And I think that, you know, again, I'm thankful that there is a choice in this country, that y'all, you know, that your family and other families, I have several homeschool friends. And so, again, I know that not every child learned the same. And so, and different family dynamics. And I chose this school for my daughter, again, because I felt like that's where the Lord was pushing me to have her, not because I saw any issues with my son in the public school. I just, I honestly thought when my son was in school, he was 2.5 years older than my daughter. Someday when she comes to the elementary, the local elementary, I'm going to go back to work. You know, that was my plan. That was my plan. Right. And so there was no reason except that I just felt like the Lord was like, no, that's not what she's going to do, And so I'm grateful for choices. But I also recognize that the majority of our kids are being educated in the public school system. Our taxes go there. So we want to make sure that our taxes are being, the school board is being a good steward, as I said, of using our tax money. It's important. And that also we're a part of that system, because the majority of people that are going to be, are once they graduate high school, they're going to be our politicians. They're going to be our pastors. They're going to be, every education that you can think, every career that you can think of in the military, in our local jobs, that type of thing. And so if we don't participate in that process, who will, right? Who is going to? And so that doesn't mean, like I said, my daughter is considering going back to public, or not back to, but to public high school for high school. And so I just say we take it year by year. If this is still working, what we're doing, then we can. If not, we'll have other options. So I enjoy the freedoms that we have to educate our children, but I recognize the important value of being active in at least some way in the public school, because that's the majority of where our kids are being taught, and what they're being taught is very important, and we can have a say so in that arena.
Well, I think that's a very wise viewpoint from your standpoint. I think one thing that we tend to do as Christians, let me back that up. One thing I tend to do is I say, hey, I know the right way to do this, right? And historically, I'll paint with a little broader brush here with Christians in general, for some reason, we like to find ways to be, to argue over our differences, right? And so we need to be just careful as Christians to not say, okay, you're homeschoolers and we're public schoolers, and so somehow that divides us. That should not be a dividing issue for Christians in any way or form. As you said, some things are just right for some people, other things are right for other people. We have to pray and seek God for what is right for our family. What would He have us to do? And then no matter whether we're, public school, private school, homeschool, we don't look down our noses at the other group for the decision they made, but rather come alongside them where we can and support them, even if that means the homeschoolers somehow get involved in the school board, or, a public schooler support something that's going on with homeschooling. So it doesn't have to be an either or situation where we divide and separate over it, but we can still come together with the larger goal of providing our kids a quality education, instilling them with good values. I always encourage people when they're looking at that decision just to ask themselves, what outcome do you want for your kids? What kind of a 18-year-old do you want to produce, and what's best in your circumstance for doing that? Rather than just thinking, okay, what's going on today? Don't respond just today, but kind of keep the end in mind as they're making those decisions. So I appreciate your input on that. You have mentioned your son a couple of times. I know you had a tragic event last year where he went to be with Jesus. In our talking previously, you had said, there were some silver linings to that cloud that you've been able to recognize months on past the event now. Can you talk just a little bit about that and where you are with that now? Because I know it's still pretty close.
Yes, so some of the things that I have, sorry, one of the main positive things that I've been able to do since Noah went to be with Jesus was to have much more opportunity to share the gospel freely. Anytime someone asks me how many kids I have, how old are they, these types of things, when I meet new people, et cetera, and I meet, a lot of new people in my role, and just in general, I get to share with them that I grieve with hope, because Noah knew Jesus as his Savior, and I know Jesus is my Savior. And so I know I'll get to spend eternity in heaven with the Lord and with my boy. So where normally when somebody asks me how many kids I have, it would be a different answer. So in about 30 seconds or less, I get to share the gospel freely with people. Whereas I could just say, I just have just my daughter, or I could have other answers, which I know, for example, for my son, for my husband and my daughter, sometimes they just don't answer because it's too painful. And so we're all on a different journey with that and how we share and how we grieve. But I have found so many opportunities that the Lord has given me to share my faith, and boldly, and there's a vulnerability there with others and for myself. And a lot of people don't even know how to respond, and I understand that because I was once in their shoes. However, it's, I've learned to extend a lot of grace to people because they don't know how to respond. But I feel thankful that I do get to be more bold and open and vulnerable with my faith with other people in those instances. Also, several of my son's friends who are not necessarily Christians, or their families go to church, or they're of different faiths. Ever since Noah went to be with Jesus, I started a group. We call it N8. Noah Williams, N for Noah, and his football number was 8. But every other Sunday, we have about 20 to 30 kids that are on my back porch, and we never stopped since August. And we got together. It was kind of more of a healing time initially, but Noah's youth pastor was with us, and he's remained with us. And I bring other different pastors in, and we, just share the gospel. We had 15 people baptized in my pool. So getting to be a part of what God is doing through these young lives and for the kingdom is it's a gift. It's a gift. And so I'm just so grateful. And my participation in the community, I've been on another board within the district. I've been, I'm on an interview team for my daughter's school. Just serving in different areas has allowed me to develop many relationships within the community. And so when they heard about Noah and they've seen our faith strengthen in the Lord through this time, many have shared with me that their faith has been strengthened, and they're doing different things in their lives now because of it. And so to get to see God's work and all of that helps me persevere. And so it's definitely the beauty from the ashes. And so again, I always want to leave people with, I grieve with hope because I know where my Noah is.
Well, the Bible tells us to always be ready to give a reason for the hope that is within us. And it sounds like you are answering that call and fulfilling that obligation and speaking of that hope that we do have in Christ. You know, we do not grieve as others grieve, and we are thankful for that. And so I appreciate you sharing with that. I know it's difficult, and I do think it is very helpful for somebody else who may be going through a similar situation. You know, the Bible also tells us with what comfort that we have been comforted to comfort others. And so I think just sharing of your experience will be a comfort to somebody who has gone through a similar situation or maybe yet to go through a similar situation. I guess one question I would have, you know, it is difficult for people to know how to respond to people like you who have gone through a situation like this. Could you speak to that? How should people respond? How can we best respond to someone who's gone through a similar tragedy to best support them?
You know, it's been humbling, the support that my family has received from our community. Truly, truly humbling. And so what I would say is, if somebody is in this situation, to let them know in whatever way is genuine to you, but to let them know either that you're praying for them. You know, I am not a cook. So when there's a meal train, I'm out. But I will do other things for people. So I would not offer to bring food because nobody wants my cooking. But there's other ways we can serve others in these situations. You know, I've gotten, you know, people will just send sweet gifts. They'll just a text, showing up and not asking, telling people, hey, I'm there for you. Let me know if you need anything. I'm never going to let anybody know. That's just my personality, that I need something, right? That is, it's difficult enough to be in this situation than to go ask somebody for something on top of it. So just show up. Like Lauren Tucker. Let me give you a quick example. Sorry. When the day after it happened, Lauren about broke down my door because she couldn't get a hold of me. And she came and she just took over. Her and my daughter, and they started just, you know, I'm usually kind of the one in charge. And she just took over. People just kind of took over for me. You know, they called the pastor. They helped. We had a lot of friends that just stepped in. Mm-hmm. And so you don't want to, you don't want to do nothing. I'll say that, you know, but even just sending somebody a card in the mail, when you know that somebody's thinking about you, that somebody's praying for you, that somebody, you know, brought you food, just do something, you know, and you don't even if you just say, I don't have the words, but I am praying for you. You know, I even meet people that I have since befriended someone whose son was murdered 2 years ago. And we have developed a friendship, and I have a hard time sometimes knowing what to say to her because it's a different scenario, you know, and so I find it hard to understand her pain, even though we have a similar pain, that we both, you know, have sons that are in heaven as teenagers. And so something, you know, I do find that the Lord's timing in it as well. He sees when we need support. So sometimes, like, for example, I'll give you one more example. On Mother's Day, a lot of times, and I'll say this too, the day before a big holiday for that family is usually, typically for me, the worst, because you're anticipating that next day. Like Noah's birthday was April 15th. So the 14th was pretty tough. That day was also tough, but we celebrated with his friends and everything looks different. But knowing that about a lot of people, but the gentleman that delivers he works for the district and delivers my board books on the Fridays of the month, the night of, I would have conversations with him when he would come by, and sometimes I gave him little things and whatnot, and just not because we have to or need to. That's just how him and I, the relationship that we had with one another. He created this beautiful stained glass for me and dropped it by the night before Mother's Day. And it was one of the most painful evenings for me. And for someone, and his note was, I wanted to give back all the kindness that you've shown me. And I've seen him, once a month for a couple of years, and just developing relationships with people, whether they're, in your life for a moment or they're in it for long term, and how you treat people. I believe God rewards us for that too, and so just those things are so special. But I believe that God knew how difficult that evening was going to be for me. And all of a sudden the doorbell rings at 9:15 at night, and he walks away and there's something on my porch, so it's God's timing, also knowing that if you couldn't send that card to somebody that week, but you send it 2 weeks later, God knew that when you were going to do it, and he knew when I would need it or that person would need it. So I could go on and on, because I'm so humbled and so grateful for all the love that we've been shown, and how God continues to be so near to our family. So just do something. I hope that.
Do something. I think that's the word that we need to hear. We tend to want to have a lot of words, right? We feel like we need to say something, but sometimes we don't need words. We need presence, or we need presence by doing something, right? You've got the stained glass. That's a presence now in your life that says this person cared enough to show their support in this way. So I think that's just a tremendous thing to do. And as you said, it doesn't have to be something large. It can be just a card or just anything like that. I think that's wonderful advice. I appreciate you sharing that. I think that's helpful for me personally, and I'm sure it'll be helpful for anybody who listens, because those are difficult situations for us to be in. So Joy, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. We've about used up our time, but I hope that what people have heard will inspire them to follow your lead and your example that you're providing for us, by getting outside of our comfort zone and getting involved and allowing our Christian influence to be used in the community for good, whether or not our kids are in the public school system or not at the time. I think it's really admirable that you would do that, because quite honestly, many of us claim to be so busy with different things that we choose not to get involved. And, we all have our reasons, but again, I think what you're doing sets a good example for us, and I appreciate you sharing with us. Any closing thoughts on anything we've talked about, or just anything you would like to share with the audience?
I would like to leave y'all with a few ways that you can get involved, is even if you just don't even know where to start. I started with, I was in some politics before that, because a friend of mine, her dad is a state rep locally, and so we would do some things. So, emailing the school board trustees, how can I support you? Is there something I can do to help? Is there a committee I can be involved in that y'all need? ask them. I mean, there's always, you can read through textbooks, you can read through some of the curriculum that we're considering adopting, give your feedback, right? You do not have to have kids in the public school to do that. I know many retirees that will spend their time reading through some of these materials and then give us feedback, so there's a lot of ways. So just, again, do something as, and you don't have to feel like that. And our public officials, the state legislatures have such an influence on what we do in the independent school districts, right? We just had our legislative session. So there's many bills that affect our education. And then we have to go through them and figure out, okay, now what do we need to do in this process? Knowing who your reps are, they're just people who are serving you. They're elected officials, just like myself. We are serving you. They're not, don't be scared to contact them. Be kind, right? When people attack, nobody enjoys being attacked, period. But when we are respectful and graceful and say, how can I support in this process, or give them our feedback, it just taking those steps forward. Go to functions. Take your friends, make it an enjoyable evening. A lot of my friends, when I first started going to some of these functions, I didn't know anybody in the room. Now I know half the people in the room, right? And it's like, it's an enjoyable experience, and it's very social because, we get plugged in. It's just like serving anywhere else. If you serve in the church, if you just go to church and you sit in the pew and then you leave, you're never going to get plugged in, and you're not going to develop relationships. So you go and you serve, or you join a Bible study or something, so you get more plugged in. It's the same way with politics. Just start out small, or find areas where you and your friends can go, or even do it alone. I started out alone in the process. But so just doing something there. And believe me, your state reps and your school board people, they have things that where they can direct you, or, just being a mentor. A lot of these places, you can be a mentor in the schools for some of the kids, right? And so just having a mentor, a positive, loving mentor, whether you're able to share your faith or not, if your love of Christ exudes into that time with them, that's going to be very powerful, And so I would say, again, just to do something, and you can make it a great experience.
I'm just imagining, calling up a few of my friends and saying, hey, I'm looking for a night out. Let's go to a school board meeting. I'm not sure how that would go over, but
maybe not that, but at least right? But here's what you say. You say, let's do dinner, but first we're going to stop by a school board meeting. We're going to go 30 minutes, and then we're going to go, and we're going to go on, right? So you can even trick them a little bit if you need to, right? But you can make it a dual thing, and then you can discuss, did y'all know there was 7? Did y'all know they were voting on this? Just small steps. But yes, you can make it what you want it to be. And it doesn't have to be a drag. For example, some people say, there's always these fundraisers or these certain events for politicians, that I tell my local political friends, nobody goes to those things. It's the same 20 people that go to everything, right? So I'm like, you have to do something that draws people in as well. But we also, not everything's going to be a fun night out, right? But you can kind of, like I said, a hybrid for a start board meeting. Just give them the address. You don't have to tell them what's going to happen. And then you say, now we're going to dinner. So anyways.
Exactly. Well, I appreciate it. Very good advice. I hope people will hear what you're saying and get involved and have some influence and use their faith that way. So Joy, again, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I really appreciate you joining us, and we will be in touch with you soon. And if there's anything we can do, let us know. And God bless you and what you're doing.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.